Uttori Zoku. This is Imari from the Always Uttori blog, where we cover fashion, food, and lifestyle topics. Exciting news! Our Q1 magazine has just landed on the blog, and it's brimming with fashion, DIYs, and even food trends for 2024. One trend that's particularly thrilling is the explosion of global flavors. Think Spanish ham-flavored chips and the rise of Asian flavors like sesame, ube, and milk tea. But what's really capturing our culinary imagination is the evolution of fusion foods, driven by the rise in third culture identities. I'll talk more about this later in the video, so stay tuned. Today, we're embracing this global flavor trend with some delicious cultural food mashups. First up, we have Czech Soul, where we're blending the sweet, comforting taste of Czech Kolache with heartwarming African-American soul food fillings like buttermilk pie with a cornbread topping or peach cobbler with a streusel topping. Then we're cooking up some French Seoul, a fusion of classic French croissants and the rich flavors of Korean cuisine with fillings like Pat-ang-geum, red bean paste, or a sweet corn pastry cream. Feeling hungry yet? We've got 2 doughs and 4 fusion flavors. Let's make some enchantment. The first dough we're making is the Kolache dough. Kolache are near and dear to my heart. Back in 2018, I published an in-depth deep dive into the history of Kolache on the Always Uttori blog. To this day, it's still one of my favorite articles. I adapted the recipe from the Bohemian American cookbook, which I got from my great-grandmother. Although her roots were Scottish and Austrian-Hungarian, she was raised in a Nebraska town rich in Czech culture. Later, she married into the Czech community, so for me, kolache are a heritage food. And that's why kolache are a perfect dough for soul food, a heritage cuisine for many in America, myself included. Buttermilk pie and peach cobbler are a tradition in Southern cuisine and something we often enjoy during family celebrations, so it only seemed natural to incorporate them into a kolache filling, another celebratory dessert. The concept of soul food comes from African American tradition and is, in itself, a fusion of various African cultures and indigenous cultures merged with what was available in America. In fact, soul food is an excellent representation of third culture, both as an identity for the displaced African diaspora and as a fusion of cultures and cuisine. So, to make the kolache dough, we've activated 1 1/8 teaspoon of active dry yeast with 1/4 cup of lukewarm milk and 1/2 teaspoon of sugar. I'm letting that sit for 10 minutes, and in the meantime, I've separated the whites and yolks of 2 eggs. Keep the egg yolks for later and whip the egg whites in a stand mixer until soft peaks form. Place the whipped egg whites in a separate bowl, then cream 1/2 cup of butter and 1/4 cup of sugar. My butter was still a bit cold, so I mixed it by itself until it softened up and then added the sugar. Once that's incorporated, add the egg yolks. Switch to a dough hook and add the egg whites to the butter. Add the yeast mixture, 1 cup of milk, 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract, zest of half a lemon, a dash of cinnamon, a dash of salt, and 2 3/4 cup of flour. Mix until the dough comes together and has an elastic quality, but is still a bit runny. At this point, you might be wondering, what is third culture? Third culture is defined as the identity of a person who was raised in a culture other than their parents, or the culture of their country of nationality. The term was coined in the 1950s by anthropologist Ruth Hill Useem. While the term often applies to children, it can also apply to adults who live abroad for a number of years. These individuals have a cultural identity that is unique to them, rather than the identity of their home culture or the culture of where they live. Often, they feel rootless. Even though they are able to relate to and connect to aspects within many cultures, they don't feel a sense of ownership. Instead, they find a sense of belonging with others that share a similar background. The phenomenon has continued to be researched over the years and has since expanded to include the various intercultural identities of those who walk between worlds. Once the dough comes together, it can still be sticky, so be sure to have extra flour set aside for handling later. For now, cover the dough and let it rise for about an hour or until it has doubled in size. While the dough is rising, we're going to make the fillings and toppings. To make the buttermilk pie filling, brown 1/4 cup of butter over medium heat. As the butter heats up, it will begin to make a popping sound. Once the popping sound has lessened, keep an eye on the butter and look for it to take on a brown color and nutty smell. This should take about 5 to 10 minutes. Let the butter cool to room temperature. Once the butter is cool, combine the brown butter, 1/2 cup buttermilk, 2 egg yolks, 1/2 cup of sugar, depending on your taste, 1 1/2 tablespoons of flour, a dash of salt, 1 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract, 1/2 teaspoon of pomelo extract or lemon juice, pomelo is my secret ingredient, the zest of half a lemon, and a dash of nutmeg. Mix well, then keep in the refrigerator until ready to use. To make the peach cobbler filling, add 1 cup of peaches into a pot. Frozen, canned, or fresh are all fine. Add 1/4 cup to 1/2 cup of brown sugar, depending on personal taste and the sweetness of the peaches. Add 1/2 teaspoon of lemon juice, and if you want, you can also add the zest of half a lemon, but that's optional. Add 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/8 teaspoon of nutmeg, and a dash of salt. Heat over medium heat. Cook until the peaches are thawed if they're frozen, and sugar is dissolved. The peaches should take on a jam-like quality, about 5 to 10 minutes. If your peaches are still on the watery side, you can add 1 teaspoon of cornstarch to help thicken it. Take it off the heat and stir in 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract. To make the cornbread streusel, add 3 tablespoons of cornmeal to a small bowl. Fill the bowl with enough boiling water to cover the cornmeal. Let sit for about 5 minutes to let the cornmeal soften. After 5 minutes have passed, strain the water from the cornmeal and return it to the bowl. Add 2 tablespoons of sugar and a final tablespoon of cornmeal. This adds some texture back without being too grainy. Mix and set aside until ready to use. To make the streusel topping, mix together 3 tablespoons of flour, 2 tablespoons of powdered sugar, and 1 tablespoon of butter in a bowl until crumbly. Now it's time to assemble the kolache. First, we're making an egg wash. To make the egg wash, mix 1 egg yolk with 1 tablespoon of milk or cream. This will go on all the kolache to help with browning. To form the kolache, flour your hands and workstation. Take the dough out by the tablespoonful. Roll into a ball with your hands, then press into a cookie shape, using your fingers to make an indent in the center of the dough. You can do this while holding the dough or on a cutting board. Going back to our discussion of third culture is interchangeable with global nomad and includes categories of children whose families worked globally in military, missionary, business, or foreign service positions. There are further subsets which can include domestic third cultures, or kids who move between distinct cultures within a country, and educational third culture, kids who are distinguished through an educational difference, like attending an international school. Additional research has suggested that third culture kids belong to a larger group of cross-cultural kids, which include multi-ethnic and multiracial children, children of refugees, children of immigrants, children of minorities, international adoptees, children of borderlands, and others with similar backgrounds. To assemble the kolache, spray the baking sheet with cooking spray or place a layer of parchment paper. Arrange the kolache with about 1/2 inch of space in between them. With a basting brush, coat the edges of the kolache with the egg wash. Fill the kolache center with the buttermilk pie filling. Once all the kolache are filled, dollop the cornbread streusel topping on the kolache. Let the kolache rise for 30 minutes. While the kolache are rising, preheat the oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. When the kolache have risen, bake for 10 to 15 minutes. When the kolache are done baking, if you'd like, you can lightly dust with nutmeg or powdered sugar. Let them cool for at least 10 minutes before enjoying. Store in the refrigerator in an airtight container for up to 4 days. For the peach kolache, spoon peach jam into the center. Sprinkle the streusel on top. I forgot to do the egg wash first, so I did it after I had assembled. Bake at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 15 minutes. When the kolache are done baking, if you'd like, you can lightly dust with powdered sugar. Researching 2024 food trends was the first time I encountered the term third culture identity and third culture cuisine. But once I started researching it, I couldn't help but find that it encapsulated some of my own experiences. As a multi-ethnic kid born in Texas and raised in Minnesota, I grew up eating Tex-Mex, another third culture fusion cuisine, while my classmates ate hot dish and lutefisk. Being third culture in an overwhelmingly Scandinavian space led me to be interested in exploring other cultures. And what better way to express and celebrate unique cultural identities than with food? While Czech Soul is my heritage third culture cuisine, French Soul, rather than being authentically third culture, is perhaps more a fusion as it is my interpretation of two cultures. While I can't claim French or Korean heritage, I do have appreciation for their respective cultures. For this dough, I'm using the New York Times croissant recipe, but instead of making a traditional croissant shape, we're going to shape the croissants into a New York roll. To make the croissant dough, I used grams because this is a more technically precise recipe. So far, we've mixed together 605 grams of all-purpose flour, 66 grams of granulated sugar, 12 grams of kosher salt, and 7 grams of active dry yeast. After mixing, form a well in the center and add 214 grams of room temperature water and 120 grams of room temperature whole milk. The New York roll is also known as a crumboloni or even a supreme. This unique dessert was invented in 2022 at the Lafayette Grand Cafe and Bakery in New York. A mix between a French croissant and an Italian bomboloni, the New York roll is yet another food that could be considered something of a third culture food, as it is a clear representation of American-born chef Andrew Carmellini's Italian heritage, as well as his experience working in restaurants in Italy and France. In fact, Lafayette Grand Cafe and Bakery focuses on a remastery of French traditions with worldly flair. Since its invention, the New York roll has spread in popularity globally, and can now be found in bakeries from Paris to Seoul. Speaking of Seoul, to fill our New York rolls, we're going with a classic red bean paste, a common filling for many Korean and Asian desserts, or a sweet corn pastry cream. Sweet corn might seem about as American as it comes, and in fact, canned corn was introduced to South Korea by American soldiers during the Korean War. Since then, it has become a uniquely Korean flavor, appearing in everything from sweet corn lattes and ice cream to Korean cheesy corn and even as a pizza topping. To catch up with the croissant dough, I let the dough rest for 10 minutes after it came together, then added 57 grams of chilled unsalted butter to the dough. Mix on a medium speed for about 10 minutes or until the dough is smooth and stretchy. Form the dough into a ball, then use a knife to cut 2 deep slashes, making an X shape. This will help us to roll the dough into a rectangle later. Cover the bowl with plastic wrap and let rise at room temperature until the dough is about 1 1/2 times its original size, about 45 minutes to 1 hour. After the dough has risen, chill in the refrigerator for 4 hours or overnight. Next, we need to make the butter block. Tear a large sheet of parchment paper measuring around 17 inches long. Fold it in half and place 340 grams of European butter in the center of the sheet. It's important to use butter with at least 84% butterfat for lamination, so it's best to go with a high-quality European butter for this. Loosely fold the parchment paper into a packet and use a rolling pin to roll or press the butter into a uniform layer. Once the butter comes together, unwrap the packet and refold it to be an 8-inch square. Fold the edges of the paper together so the butter won't leak out, and roll the butter out into the shape of a square. Transfer the butter block to the refrigerator. After the dough has chilled, remove it from the refrigerator. Next, deflate the dough and place it on your work surface. Use the 4 points from the cross to stretch the dough outward into a rough square. Try to keep the square around 8 inches. Transfer the dough to the plastic wrap, cover and roll into an 8-inch square. Freeze for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, remove the dough from the freezer and the butter from the refrigerator. Place the dough on a lightly floured surface. Save the plastic wrap for later. Roll the dough out to 16 inches long and 8 inches wide. Now it's time for lamination. The butter should be pliable, but still firm, a similar texture to the dough. Unwrap the butter and place it face side down in the center of the dough. Next, bring out one side of the dough over the butter toward the center. Then do the same on the other side, encapsulating the butter. The dough should meet in the center. If it doesn't, gently stretch the dough until it does. Pinch the dough together along the center and side seams so the butter won't leak out. Rotate the dough 90 degrees so the center seam is oriented vertically. Roll the dough out to 24 inches long and 1/4 of an inch thick. Be careful to push the dough away rather than applying downward force to avoid the butter merging with the dough too much. Also try to keep the sides of the dough as straight as possible. If air bubbles appear while rolling the dough out, you can pop it with the tip of a knife. Once you've rolled the dough out, use a sharp knife or wheel cutter to trim where the butter doesn't extend all the way and any excess dough. Make sure the corners form right angles. Once the dough is evened out, take the side furthest from you and fold it into the middle. Press slightly so the dough sticks together, then repeat with the other side, leaving a small gap around 1/8 inch. Fold the slab in half along the gap you left. The dough should now resemble a book that's 4 layers. Wrap the book in the leftover plastic wrap and freeze for 15 minutes. After freezing, refrigerate for 1 hour. After refrigerating, roll the dough out to measure 24 inches long, then fold it into thirds like a letter. To do this, bring one side of the dough over, then overlap the other side over the top of that. Gently press down so the layers adhere, then wrap in plastic wrap and freeze for 15 minutes, then refrigerate for 1 hour. Remove the dough from the refrigerator, then roll the dough out, but this time aim for 14 by 17 inches. By this point, you may find the dough is more resistant to rolling out. Try to get it as close to those dimensions as you can. Once it's rolled out, slide the dough onto a baking sheet or cutting board and cover with plastic wrap. You may need to fold part of it over if it's too long. Freeze for 20 minutes, then refrigerate overnight, 8 to 12 hours. Now would be a good time to focus on the fillings and to make the molds. Because we are doing a New York roll shape, we need circular molds or pastry rings to help the rolls keep their shape. The mold size should be at least 4 inches but can vary in size. If you have large cookie cutters, English muffin molds, or even mini springform pans, all will work as a mold. If you don't have a mold, you can make them out of aluminum foil. Measure a piece of aluminum about 8 inches long. Cut down the middle so each piece is about 4 inches wide, then fold both pieces in half. Connect the edges by folding over. This recipe makes about 11 croissants, so you will need 11 molds total. To make the red bean paste, soak 1 cup of dried azuki beans in water overnight. The next day, drain the beans and cover with about 1 inch of fresh water. I threw mine in a pressure cooker and cooked on the bean setting, which takes about 40 minutes. If you are using the stove, simmer on medium heat for about 1 hour or until the beans are soft, keeping an eye on the water and adding more as necessary. Drain any excess water once the beans are cooked, and then place the beans in a medium pot. Add 3/4 cup of sugar, or to taste, and a pinch of salt. Cook over low heat, stirring frequently until the sugar is dissolved and a thick paste is formed. If you want a smooth texture, you can mash the beans or blend the beans in a food processor. I wanted a more rustic texture, so I let the beans naturally mash as I stirred and left mini beans whole. It's up to your personal preference. You can keep the red bean paste in the refrigerator for 3 to 4 days. To make the sweet corn pastry cream, heat 1 1/4 cup of whole milk and 3/4 cup of corn in a small pot. Frozen, fresh, or canned corn works. Cook until bubbles form on the side of the pot and the milk is warm. Remove from the heat and blend the corn and milk. Be careful when blending hot liquids. Next, in a medium pot, add 3 large egg yolks and 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. Whisk together until combined, then add 1/3 cup of sugar and whisk until combined. Next, strain the corn milk mixture and add about 1/4 cup to the egg yolks, stirring to combine. Once that's incorporated, add the rest of the milk into the egg mixture in a slow stream. Stir to combine. Turn on the heat and cook over low until the mixture thickens into a custard texture, 5 to 10 minutes. Remove from the heat and stir in 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract and 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter. Stir until smooth. Pour into a container and place plastic wrap directly on its surface to prevent a skin from forming. Chill in the refrigerator until ready to use. Now that the fillings are done, let's get back to the New York rolls. The next day, boil some water and place in a skillet in the bottom of your oven for proofing the dough. While the steam warms the oven, place the dough on a lightly floured surface. Double check that the dough measures 17 by 14 inches. If it has shrunk, roll it out to the correct dimensions again. Use a wheel cutter or sharp knife and ruler to trim any uneven edges and to square off the dough. You can save the scraps if you want to make crescent rolls. The butter layers aren't as pronounced and the texture feels more like a crescent roll. Or you can cut up the pieces and toss with some brown sugar and bake in muffin tins, an idea I got from Thea's Table on YouTube. To shape the New York roll, begin rolling the end closest to you in the manner of a cinnamon roll. After you roll a little bit, spray or flick a little bit of water onto the surface of the dough. This keeps the dough from unraveling while rising and baking. Keep rolling until you reach the other end. Spray more water at the end to make sure the edge of the dough is securely attached so it won't unravel. Measure 1-inch sections on the roll and mark with a knife by indenting. Wrap in plastic wrap and freeze for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, cut the dough along the lines. Place the rolls into the pastry rings on a baking sheet covered with parchment paper and cover loosely with plastic wrap. Place the trays in the steamed oven. Temperature should be around 70 to 75 degrees. Any hotter and the butter will melt. Let the croissants proof until they've doubled in size, about 2 to 2.5 hours. They should be very puffy and jiggle a little when shaken. Be careful, if you are making smaller rolls with scraps, they may overproof, so check them sooner than the larger ones. And you can see the butter ran a bit on some of my smaller croissants. After the rolls have proofed, take them out of the oven and refrigerate for 20 minutes. Remove the skillet from the oven and heat the oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Once the oven has come to temperature, take the rolls from the refrigerator and bake for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, remove them from the oven and take the molds off. Use a spatula to flip the croissants onto the other side. The bottom should be a deep golden brown and crispy. Cook for an additional 5 minutes after flipping. The other side will not be as deep a color as the bottom side, but flipping helps to add color and create crispiness. You can choose which side you wish to be the display side. Additionally, I haven't tried it, but placing another baking sheet on top may help to cook the croissants on both sides at the same time. I saw some videos of professionals making the rolls doing something similar. However, if you made aluminum molds, this would crush the dough. But it might be something worth experimenting with if you had enough pastry molds. Finally, if you don't wish to flip the rolls, the top of the croissants will brown lightly and is passable. I did some testing and found that flipping helped to keep the croissant more flat, as they tended to rise from the center of the croissant and also made them look more uniform overall. Let the croissants cool until room temperature before filling. After the croissant rolls have cooled, use a knife or sharp object to poke a hole in the top side of the roll. Wiggle the knife around to create space for the filling. Transfer the filling into a piping bag or plastic baggie and fill the New York rolls until the hole you created is full. If some filling comes out from the front or out of the top, you can gently wipe it off. Do this for both fillings. I divided mine into 5 for the red bean paste and 5 for the sweet corn pastry cream. I haven't forgotten the discussion on third culture and fusion food, and at this point, you might be wondering why I said my take on the New York roll is more fusion food than third culture cuisine. It's easy to confuse fusion food and third culture cuisine, of which there is a distinct but minute difference. The difference really comes down to the lived experience and authenticity. Fusion food can have a negative connotation, sometimes coming across as culturally insensitive or even gimmicky, when the proper research hasn't been done. Because cultural foods are an important part of identity, it can feel disingenuous to mash flavors that don't necessarily go together for the purpose of clout, to be edgy, or to make a profit. That's not to say fusion food is bad. When done well, thoughtful dishes can be created. But because of the importance of cultural foods to their communities, there are concerns about appropriation and authenticity, especially in restaurant settings. Further, because food is an intangible but important reflection of cultural identity and cultural traditions, there can sometimes be resistance to change. Adaptations can come into conflict with the desire for preservation of traditions, but change is inevitable. As food travels, it changes, and as we travel, the food changes. And this is why third culture cuisine is more than the latest trend in food spaces. Instead, it's a word that helps us describe the changes in identity and lived experiences as our world becomes increasingly global. Once the croissants have been filled, melt some compound chocolate in the microwave following your package's instructions. I did white chocolate with a sprinkle of black sesame seeds for the red bean paste New York roll and milk chocolate with yellow sugar sprinkles for the sweet corn New York roll. Let the chocolate set and then serve. You can store in an airtight container in the refrigerator for up to 4 days. Third culture cuisine isn't exactly fusion because it's a personal interpretation of a unique lived experience. Recipe developer and cookbook author Hetty McKinnon puts it this way: it's easy to categorize third culture cooking as simply fusion, but to do so erases how deeply connected these dishes are to people, place, and time. Unshackled of geographic certainty, this feeling of rootlessness is exactly what makes third culture food so comforting to children who grew up teetering between 2 or more cultures. Existing in a third culture can often feel neither here nor there, but in food, we can better understand the confluence of identity, how we can be a mixture of a lot of things, how we can still exist in harmony. This distinct difference is important as cultural foods are an expression of that culture. So too is third culture cooking an expression of a unique identity. As more people who identify as third culture explore this identity through food, third culture cuisine has begun to take over the culinary scene through social media, cookbooks, and restaurants. Maybe you don't fall into the definition of third culture kid, but I think that there's something relatable about it for everyone. We all have our unique lived experiences and identity beyond culture or ethnicity, and food has always been an expression of that throughout history. So, while third culture cuisine is having its time in the limelight, It's really something that has been with us since the beginning of time. As long as humans have been migrating and moving, our food has adapted and changed with us. That doesn't mean third culture cuisine isn't special in its own right. It deserves to finally get its chance to shine as a recognized food style, one that is unique to the experiences of the individual. If you enjoyed this exploration of third culture cuisine, I'd love to hear your thoughts on third culture identity and food in the comments below. Do you identify as third culture? What third culture foods do you love? If you found the recipes we shared inspiring, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more. Thanks for watching, and remember, enchantment awaits. Life is just about finding it.